Okay, everybody, let's talk about this thing because it's really, really annoying me at this point. Okay, and like always, it doesn't matter if I repeat this so many times. It's not about putting down somebody else's work. It's about trying to understand things, in particular, given the context, because in particular, Sina, not so much. Sorry, not Sina. PlanC, not so much Sina. Sina, I respect Sina. Sina is a professional. I don't know what is going on here in this particular case, but everybody, can have moments where they don't see things clearly. And plus, I think has also to do with this training as a business person, rather, than like somebody that really works hard. Like hard is not the right word, but let's say a more hard science, like physics, where we deal with different kind of data. In fact, complex data all the time. Okay, and Bitcoin, it's complex data, and the problem with Bitcoin also, it's more, it has more dynamic type of data and behavior. For example, the long-term power law, these periodic oscillations, that are not easy to be described by the usual tool that maybe a business person or a business professor deals with. It's more like a signal, a real signal, like some physical signal that comes from an object, a star or whatever. It's not that the financial signal cannot be treated in the same way. They can. People are not used to that. There are few analysts like John Heller, for example, with he's an engineer, and you try to apply signal analysis to finance data. There are people like, my favorite physicist, financial physicist, Ornette, that uses log periodic power laws and other tools of physics. So let's go here, right? The problem with this is it's okay to explore different way to understand the data. The problem is when you obfuscate and you make claims that are beyond what these tools are meant for. And this is what is happening here. Absolutely what is happening here. First of all, PlanC with all this grandiose claim that this is, the ultimate model that is agnostic to this, agnostic to that, is not. It has a lot of assumptions, okay? And we can discuss it. Every tool, every method has assumptions. So there is nothing agnostic about this approach at all. So the problem, though, it's twofold. One, it's a power law method. Okay, they try to dismiss. Some people show me the progression of PlanC, how we went from calling it the power law, quantile regression, and then suppress the power law. There is a lot of politics, like always. I don't understand why. I don't get these political things. To create something new, this is a completely different model. It's based on the power law, because how this works, okay, they never tell you. They give to the code, in this case ChatGPT, because of this stuff is all done by ChatGPT. It's beautiful, it's nice, there is nothing wrong with using ChatGPT, but be honest with people about what you're doing. Okay, so you should tell them that you're using the log of time and the log of price. When you do these two things, and then you're asking for a linear regression, by design, you're trying to look implicitly, you're asking the code to look for a power law fitting, because when you have a straight line in a log chart, it's a power law by definition, by math. You can show it. If people claim otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know math. So it's a power law. We are trying to find a bunch of power laws, hopefully consistent and coherent power laws. That is part of a problem in the data. They don't tell you that. In fact, that is part of, there are a bunch of misleading things in how they're handling this situation. And I'm making a list of them, right? All of them. Another misleading thing is that they always plotted in this way. It's fine, because sometimes it's easier for people to understand linear time, but they never, even once I saw them, or maybe in the past when there was an adherence to the power law. Now we're trying to obfuscate it by showing this curvy line that are all straight lines. When you plot them in a log chart, they are straight lines. No question about, they are straight lines. I can show you. I did it. I reproduce all the calculations because anybody, that is the beauty of math. You can reproduce the calculation. You can do it. And you can ask ChatGPT. I can also share the code. I will share the code so you can reproduce it, okay? So these are going to be straight lines. Now, the question is, if there is a real power law, that is what you're asking the code to find, these power laws should be more or less parallel to each other. They are not. They are converging. You can see here, these lines, whatever they are, eventually they will meet and then cross. So that is weird because that is the first problem. And look on ChatGPT about problems with the quantile method. That is one of the first things that we mentioned. That sometimes people get disappointed by this approach because you have these crisscrossing quantiles, okay? That here it's very far in the future, but actually it's because of the data chosen, because I show if you choose data up to a certain point, I don't remember what, we can discuss it. I think up to 2020, for example, the crisscrossing, it's already there. So there is an anomaly where I think it's thrown off by that data point, these data points where usually we stay very close to the bottom of the power law. Here we went above, and that confuses the algo and creates this crisscrossing quantile, but it's nonsense. But eventually these lines will cross in the future. It is already nonsense. What is supposed to mean? Nothing. It's a known problem with the quantile method, and they don't tell you that. And actually, they ignore it. They are not aware of, they ignore it. So that is part of the problem. The other problem is, that if you, let's first talk about the real data, right? The real data, one of the things we want to see if there is stability. Basically, if I fit up to a point and then I try to make a prediction based only on fitting a certain amount of data, right? We call it the training data. And then we're using the rest of the data almost like, we play this game. We pretend that we didn't know what the future looks like. We know because we are using half of the data as our prediction, as what is going to happen in the future. And so we pretend to know only half of the data or a little bit more, whatever you want. And then we make a prediction. If you go only with the first two bubbles, you get a completely different result. And they address this saying, oh, it's not stable, etc. Well, if it is so good as you're claiming, if your quantile model is this universal, incredible thing that can describe everything, it should be able to do so. It doesn't. Do you know what it does? The upper bottom. So the upper bottom, if you look at just the first quantile, you can go 4 years and it's already stable. So how come the bottom is stable and the top is not? It's stable after 4 years. The top gives you completely crazy result. If you connect only the two tops on the first two tops, if you use data up to the first two tops, you get a completely different result. We cannot predict neither of the two bubbles after it. They are completely off. Okay, so this is a problem not addressed. The problem is even when you include the third bubble. The third bubble is not predicted. They show these APSK video that are cool videos, but the problem with that video is that you cannot really follow what is going on. The lines are moving so fast and it's not clear. I did the calculation. I can show you the calculation. If you include only 3 bubbles and you're trying to predict the fourth one, you get a result like 98,000, so close to 100,000, while then everybody knows we kind of reach like 60,000. So they miss it by a big factor, okay? And that including all the bubble up to the third one. The problem with that is even worse because by the time you include the fourth bubble, now the quantile go down and touch that point of a, and now, which one is the real top? Was the first peak? Was the second peak? Because in my understanding of a cycle, the second peak is the real peaks because it aligns almost perfectly with all the other ones. So that, that we can leave it as a secondary issue. Now the quantile refit, and that is exactly the type of test that shows that the upper quantiles are not stable. So there, don't know what is this campaign about, pushing this thing without being honest about it. It's, it's a complete utter failure. Now the problem is this: how do we know what is going to happen if we add a fifth bubble, a sixth bubble, a seventh bubble, right? How do we know? Well, it can be done. It can be shown. Okay, it can be shown. I can show you how you do that. How you do that? That is something that I discussed for 100 times with them, with Sina and PlanC, and they continue to ignore it. And I don't know why. I explain all my points, I explain in all the details what this thing is doing and why it's relevant, and they ignore it. They ignore it because there is no way to address it. I want to see anybody that knows any math, any person at all, to address this issue. Because again, if a quantile is what they say it is, this very agnostic method, this very robust method, it should be able to deal with any signal, right? Unless I do something completely crazy, like you say, oh, Giovanni, you're making something completely crazy, an example so absurd that basically, you are strawmanning the quantile regression method. I'm not. I'm doing the opposite. I'm finding a relatively simple toy model, what this is how we will call it in physics, and show that in a situation like this, that by the way, is kind of an idealization of what we see, because you can show the bubbles are periodic. It's not a fantasy. Their initial idea, it was not too bad. They say, well, yes, it seems that the bubbles are periodic, but can we find a way that doesn't explicitly contain that information, right? Or we don't have to marry ourselves to this interpretation that the bubbles are periodic, maybe because the next bubble is not going to happen exactly where the other ones are happening. Maybe it's happening a little bit later, maybe it's happening a little bit so initially it's okay. This reminds me, by the way, this the title is the power law quantile model is the new S2F, because it's very similar to how plans B, plan B, plan C, all plans. Our plan B approached the S2F problem. He wanted to understand why we see this beautiful power law that, I think he read, I know he read my paper, my post on the power law in 2018, and in 2019 he wanted to find some explanation. In his mind it was S2F, and he tried to fit a power law where a power law doesn't fit. This is what he tried to do. And they are doing kind of the same, but they don't even realize they are actually fitting power law. Neither PlanC, I discussed this with Sina, and he denies this, saying, well, not all the lines in a log. No, a line in a log graph, if you're feeding the data that is log of time, in particular log of days since the Genesis block and the log of price, and you're asking the code to find a linear fit that it is a line, then you will get power laws. This is what it is, and in fact, you can see the result. My result, I will show you in a moment. We never show this type of graph. You say, but Giovanni, why you're so fixated with power law? What the quantile model has to do with the power law? Everything, because this is what we do. There are many different ways to do quantile. You could ask fit exponentials, fit splines, but they explicitly do it, at least in this way, in this realization. Now, if they do something else in the future, then who knows? But in this particular realization, what we are doing, they are fitting straight lines through the entire data. And it makes no sense because there is only one power law. Now, this is where my example come from. And many people would not get the relevance of this because you're not used to this. You're not used to think like a physicist. I don't know if this is done in other fields. In physics, we always play with these toy models, okay? It's basically you create some kind of fake signal. So imagine you want to test some device, some detector or something, right? Because many times we build detectors, right? To detect particles, to detect something. You calibrate the instrument. It's something that, you don't do in finance, you don't do in other fields, but physicists do this all the time. To me, it's so difficult to think. People are not used to this way of thinking. Yeah. So you have like basically the quantile method or any other analysis method. It's like a detector. You're trying to extract the signal from the noise. You're trying to detect something from the data. You're trying to detect what are the trends, what are the patterns. Okay. You're trying to do that. So imagine I have a detector and I made this, and PlanC in his ignorance, in his profound ignorance. Sorry that I get so emotional about PlanC, but he really started to push my buttons. In his profound ignorance, he dismissed it by saying, "Oh, it's painful," and then he blocked me when I did this example. But let's avoid the drama. Let's talk about math. Imagine I have a detector, like some kind of artificial intelligence system, etc., and I show it different fruit, and it's supposed to be a detector to tell us fruits, right? So I show a complex fruit, something that I don't even know what it is, some of these weird Asian fruits. I don't even know what it is. And I show it and it tells me it's such and such. I don't know. It could be. I have no clue. I don't even know what is the name of this thing. But I know what a banana is. So I go there, I show the banana, and it tells me banana. I go there, shows me apple. It tells me, okay, great, apple. Whoa. I show a pear. It tells me it's the pear. I show it chestnut. Oh, it's a chestnut. Whoa, these things really work. I tested with almost all the fruits that I know. It tells me all the true things. When I show it something I don't know, like in this case, we could think of it, we don't know the true behavior of Bitcoin. I show it something different that I never saw it before. I don't even know the name of this thing. It tells me it's such a papa peep. I don't know what, some crazy name. Okay, it has to be like that. It has to be like this because this thing works. It's never 100% sure. It could fail with this, but my confidence that is able to pick up almost any fruit in existence goes up, right? It goes up. But if I show it a banana and it tells me it's an apple, it's a problem, right? It's a problem. And you cannot tell me, well, you show it with banana, it's not really. No, if it fails with the banana, it fails with anything. You get it? So let's do the banana test with the quantile model. The banana test, now, and let me show you something funny, because Sina tried to do a banana test. He showed this. I don't know exactly what he did, but just by look, it's a fuzzy power law, because these lines, remember, are supposed to be power laws. They follow, these dots follow the lines, so they are power laws. I would like to see the version of these with straight lines in the log graph. I tell you, I can assure you, because I can reproduce it. I didn't, but I can reproduce it. It's a fuzzy power law. Fuzzy power law will look like this. So there is a power law plus some noise. Yes, the quantile method works very well with things like that. In fact, even the least square method works like that. You see how the 50% quantile and that is basically the middle of these lines, and the least square, that is the green line, they are almost identical. If you plot it in a log graph, it will look like basically parallel line. It's just slightly different because of how they work, the mathematics behind. But basically, they see the same signal. There is a signal there. This is how he created this artificial signal. He created by having a power law and added some noise. Okay, and I can show you. This is exactly what it will look like. I should reproduce it myself, and it will look exactly that. And then I can show you that it's a bunch of straight line if you do it in a log graph. Now, that is not what we are discussing here. We are discussing, sure, okay, the detector can detect oranges, okay? So it's good with the oranges. Then I show a banana and it tells me it's an apple. Problem, okay? It's a problem. right? And then I can show other more complicated fruit, papaya, and it tells me it's cherries, okay? It goes off when it start to see things that are not that familiar. You understand? By the time it deals with non-familiar things that are a little bit more complex, it doesn't do a good job. So because it's not designed for that way, it's designed more for things like this, where you have some straight signal and then some noise. But if you have something more complicated, a statistical method by itself fails. Let me go back to my example. This is my example. This is the problem. So this is still meaning something or strong meaning my argument, right? You say, yeah, sure, I concede it works for this. Big deal. It doesn't work with things that look like this. And Bitcoin looks more like this than Sina example, because if it was just a power law with some noise and some fuzziness, around, we will not here to debate anything. There will be nothing to debate. It will be a beautiful power law. Everybody will recognize it's a power law. There will not be discussion. The problem is these bubbles that make, confuse people. All right. So this is our challenge. And to make the challenge more understandable and more controllable, I created a toy model, what is called a toy model. So basically what I did, I also did a power law. I can make it fuzzy. I can add noise. I added some noise. I reduce it to make it more clear the signal, what is the real signal there. But it's okay. It should work with noise. It should work with signal. It should work with anything. If what we say is true. It's obvious that it doesn't work with anything, because if it was working with anything, we will all use the quantile. I tell you one thing. I worked in science for 30 years in 3 different fields. I never saw anybody using a quantile model. I don't remember any time where I look at the chart and say, what am I looking at? How quantile regression. I know what quantile regression is. There are maybe 20 different ways of doing regression that are all, they have pros and cons. And they are used for different purposes, different situations, right? But it's all basically the same idea, where you're trying to find some kind of a fit. You have to tell it. There are some fits that they try to find the line themselves. They necessarily have to be straight lines. But if you explicitly ask for finding straight line, like they do, you will find straight lines. This is what you get, right? You're asking the computer to do a certain thing, so it will do a certain thing. If you have a hammer, everything looks like nails. That is what is going on here. So let's go to this example. This example is somehow a simplification, not a perfect reproduction, because I will tell you what is the main difference with how the real signal, Bitcoin signal, looks like. The Bitcoin signal could be approximated with a power law, then some oscillation. The problem with these oscillations, if you consider really the bottom to be the real power law, is more like a power law plus some bumps, right? The periodic bumps. I can make that model too, and we can see how it behaves. But here I try to do something quick. So I did a straight line and then sine waves around the straight line and a decay, because that is, and all these things are not made up. These are things that actually you can show Bitcoin does. You can use a Fourier transform to show that there's periodicity. You can superimpose you can take segments of 4 years, then put them on top of each other, and you see that the peaks kind of align. It's, you can say, oh, I don't want to believe in cycles. Well, they happen, the data that we have and we deal as these cycles that are periodic. So a sine wave is a good representation of that. And there is a decay, because if you subtract the real data from the power law, you can see this decay. You can characterize it. It's an exponential decay. It's real. It's not imaginary. It's there. Independently of all these, if I make an example like this, that is supposed to be, it's not crazy. Like, if I made some weird thing, some huge big spike or something, then you could say, well, you're creating something that is so absurd that nothing will work. No, it's a pretty simple, relatively simple, complex in the sense that has elements, several elements, 3 elements, but it's nothing crazy. It's actually a pretty standard type of signal. In fact, it's interesting that we see Bitcoin doing these things. Power law, sine waves, these are almost standard elements of signal analysis, almost like all the usual suspects. You see periodic oscillations, you see power laws, you see decay. These are typical things that in physics we deal with them all the time. It's not very often that you have all 3 combined, but you can have them. You can have it could be, certain things that you observe in the natural world that behave in that particular way. Okay, so if a quantile method was this incredibly robust, incredibly general, incredibly all these good things that we're saying it should handle this example well. It doesn't. Let me show you. Okay, you see all these lines in the left? So I did 2 graphs. One where I show the quantile regression in a log chart. And then I didn't change anything. I follow exactly the same method that they did. I don't have their code, but I know exactly what they did. They did exactly this. I can reproduce the result when I use real data, exactly like they did. And so I use the same method, and they look curvy, right? They look these weird curves on the right. But we know Bitcoin has the same type of curve, right? Because this is how a power law looks like in what is called a log linear chart, that is the one on the right. In the right, I'm using the x-axis linear, and I'm using the log of the y-axis. Okay, forget about the numbers, etc. It doesn't matter. We are trying to understand the mechanics of what is going on, what is happening. Okay, and this actually, please I know that some people don't care about all these. They want to see a cool chart. They want to click, etc. But if you really are interested in understanding what we are doing, because you see these charts all the time, don't you want to understand how they are created, what they mean, how it should be interpreted, if they are reliable, if they are not reliable, if there is some information, if there is some alpha there? Don't you want to understand that? You should appreciate actually somebody like me that spends all this time to try to discuss it with you and trying to explain it. Okay, it should be considered invaluable. Don't criticize me for it. If you don't care, then listen to somebody else. Enjoy your beautiful chart, because it's not about beautiful chart. Sure, that is a skill, is great, and PlanC is a master with this, but in the end, it's the alpha in the signal. You want to have information. You want signal and not noise. Okay, so let's go here with this example. What I apply the quantile method. One of the things I try to do here is to add a lot of oscillations. We don't have a lot of oscillations with the real data. We have only 4. So that is part of the problem. If imagine there is some detector that works, for 30 minutes, or whatever, 1 hour, and I show it a bunch of fruits, and for 1 hour it does a good job, and then after 1 hour it starts to go crazy and it doesn't give the right answer. That will be a problem. But if you test it only for 1 hour, you will think, whoa, it works fantastic, and then you run it for 2 hours, and maybe there is a problem with the battery or whatever. It loses too much power. It doesn't hold the battery power. There is some problem with the machine. After 1 hour, it goes crazy. Well, that is another test you want to do. You want to see how it performs over time. So here I added many oscillations, and this is the beauty of doing it something artificial like that you control everything. You can add more oscillations. You can look up the behavior further in the future. And everything. The amplitude of the oscillation. How fast it decays. You can control it. You can make the oscillation faster. You can make the decay faster, slower. The slope of the power law. You understand why this is useful? Anybody that tried to dismiss it saying, "Oh, it's an artificial signal," say, yes, that is the point. And just people like PlanC will dismiss it because they don't understand it. They don't get it. and he was never to address these. And I'm waiting an answer from Sina, and didn't get it yet. I explained to him point by point exactly what I'm trying to demonstrate, what my concerns are, and I didn't have anybody addressing this concern. But now let's see what the concerns are. Notice what the answer, because this is the answer, right? You have an input, and the method, the tool, is not a new model. It's just a tool to understand the data. The tool gives you an answer. The answer, it's a bunch of power laws. No doubt about that. You see how these lines, they are all power laws. There is only one power law there. And how do I know? Because I build it. That is, again, see, this is the game that we are playing here. I know what is the signal, what is the input. With real data, you can always say, I don't know, is there a power law? Maybe not. Is there oscillation? Maybe not. You can always, because it's complex, right? It's not perfect. There is noise. There are not really sine waves. It's complex bubble. They go up, and then there is a lot of noise. It's difficult, right? So in this case, I don't have a problem. Everything is controlled. I know exactly what the input is. So I'm expecting the output to represent the input as close as possible. Does it do a good job? Well, it's not clear here, but the central power law is represented by the smallest quantile. So if you look at the smallest quantile, actually I get a result that is close to the real power law, because one of the output here, I'm not showing it, but I can print to screen when I run this code what the different slope of the different quantiles is. In fact, turns out the closest to the real power law, it's about 30. You will expect is 50, is closer to 30. But the one between 30 and 50 are pretty good. They are representing pretty good what the real signal there is, because you can think almost like three signals. There is a central power law, there are oscillations, and then there is the decay. Three signals, okay? And we need to find the three signal. It does a good job if you stick only with the smallest quantiles, or up to maybe 30-40% quantile, to recover, to tell us here in this weird signal I'm seeing a power law. It does a good job. That also what happens with the real data. The bottom quantiles, the smallest quantile, they give us the real power law. We don't know, because in the case of the data, we are thinking there is a power law, but there are many tests. One of the things is you see all these beautiful quantiles. That is one of the useful things of a quantile. It's very robust and very consistent way of creating a bunch of levels that are all consistent. That is what you will expect from a trend. You want the trend to be consistent. If there is a trend, it needs to be consistent. And we found the trend at the bottom. So this is how a physicist will reason, right? Oh, there is a trend, and the trend is made by the lowest quantiles. Same thing happened here. Now, notice what happened with the oscillation. It draws a bunch of converging lines. Why? Because it gets confused. It doesn't know how to interpret with the tool it has, because it doesn't know it. Imagine all what you know in life is just straight lines. At that point, you will try to represent an exponential with a bunch of straight lines that kind of converge, because it kind of looks like a decay, but it's not a real decay. And it's not that I'm expecting a beautiful exponential to come up from the data, but it's a nonsensical answer because of the tools that you're using. You're getting all these straight lines, and what do they mean? So, for example, let me explain. Imagine you say, like, kind of what we're doing right now, PlanC and Sina, that you think that the uppermost quantile, it's kind of like where the tops are. Well, it's not true. It's true for the first few oscillations. In fact, you can count them. Like we can say, first of all, notice how they don't really touch the top. They touch kind of somewhere, and that somewhere changes, becomes smaller. Notice how it became smaller. This also happens in the data. The upper one of the bubble will have a lot of dots. The other bubble will have less dots, and that less dots, until the dots for the upper quantile are not there at all, because the next bubbles, they completely decouple from the top quantile. The top quantile doesn't represent what happens after few oscillations. If anybody that is trained in real data analysis and sees this, in fact, I show it to Moni Deb. Welcome, I never argue with Moni or Deb, right? Stephen Perino, because we have the same training. We have 30, he probably has 40 years of data analysis. I have 30. He knows by looking at stuff. You get that kind of knowledge. It's not that I'm telling you, trust me, but it's a fact. It's a fact that we know. Mostly, I can make errors, of course. I can say stupid things, of course, but most of the time, my intuition tells me what is going on, okay? And I'm trying to tell you how to think about these things so you can develop the same intuition over time. Because if you want to use these charts for whatever, right? Not necessarily trading, just to give you a feeling of what is going on with Bitcoin in the future, long-term holding, etc. It doesn't have anything to do with trading. It has to do with understanding what Bitcoin does. It's basically what all of us are trying to do. Okay, so you see how these bubbles start to decouple from these lines, because basically, if you think and reason what the quantile model does, it tries to find the uppermost quantile. That means if I go to 95, it means I'm using only 5% of the data. Not exactly. I'm using 5% of the data. I give it a huge big weight to it. I give it, in fact, 95% weight. That is basically almost everything. And I give very little weight to the other data, right? So this is what it's doing. It's trying to give a lot of weight to the quantile you're describing, and a little bit of weight to everything else. And so, yeah, it's fitting mostly the tops, and it will be a little bit skewed because there is also the contribution of the other data points, because it's always using everything, but with different weights. That is what how the quantile regression works. It gives a lot of weight to the quantile, and then basically 1 minus the value of the quantile to everything else. Okay, so yeah, this is what happens. But it's not easy to understand the algorithm itself, but we don't even need to understand the algorithm. We just look at the graph and we get the intuition. You see how the next bubbles are now represented by that quantile. And the question is, well, then is there a quantile that somehow represents this feature, this important feature that is the tops? No, because you can see as the the signal decays, it crosses many different quantiles. In fact, it will cross all of them. Here I'm representing just few of them, but they start to cross more and more quantiles. So there is no one single quantile that represents the signal, the tops. So if they don't represent the top, what does quantile represent? They don't represent any feature, because if we can say, well, they represent this part. No, they don't, because as it doesn't work for the tops, it doesn't work with any other features. You understand? It doesn't represent any part of the signal. It's just this converging straight line. It's like a, when they do this, there was it doesn't happen anymore often, but was a period of time where it was popular to take some funny video, maybe from Bollywood, and then you will hear the people talking in their native language, wherever it was, Tamil or Hindi, and people were trying to hear English, right? Thinking that, okay, if this word was an English word, maybe pronounced by a foreigner, right? It will sound like this, right? And then the most hilarious thing happened. People, was really, you will explode of laughter, right, by reading the subtitles of these Bollywood songs. This is what happens here. That is the best analogy that I can give you. the method is confused and it tells you, this is what I see, this is what I think I hear it. It's dancing wolves, and maybe the people speaking in the original language are saying completely different, but it doesn't have to do with dancing wolves, right? Or flying cars, whatever it is. We are not saying that. You hear it, and it's not true. And this is what this thing does. They say, I see a bunch of power laws, but there are no bunch of power laws. Do you see? You understand? And okay, then you will say, well, wait a second, though. Let's think in a more abstract way. Let's think statistically, right? Because this is what probably Sina will say. That will be one of the, I don't know. I want to see his answer. This is why I'm so eager to hear his answer. He will say, well, I tell you what these lines mean. So they mean that, there is some particular chance that the signal goes above these quantile. So if you take, let's say you take the 95% quantile. So it's very difficult that we go there because it's so far away. But, there is a 5% chance that we could go higher than that. No, it doesn't mean that, because you can see the signal, this particular signal, has no chance, because of its nature, of ever going above that quantile. So there is only one interpretation. And tell me if you guys agree with this. I don't see that your question or anybody is alive at all in this. There are actually a few people listening. Okay, so you can ask. You can tell me what you think, but I think the only possible interpretation is this. I'm telling you what I think. I think it means, well, in the past there were some crazy tops that created this line, and if a signal had, if we had a distortion as big as the first one, proportionally of where we are, then we will reach that quantile. Okay, yeah, right, sure. Is that useful or interesting? Basically, imagine I tell you, yeah, the coin price during the first bubble went 15 times bigger than the middle line. So I'm drawing this line that is the upper quantile, that is basically where the signal will go, where the bubbles will go, if we reproduce the same type of distortion that we had at that time. All right. Okay. So it's better than nothing. It's some kind of limit, but it's not very useful. It's not predictive of where the top is. It's basically creating FOMO, unnecessary FOMO. And this, again, why it looks like S2F. It's another S2F. S2F is much more crazy. Okay. So I'm kind of joking here. I wanted to get your attention, but I don't know if that caught your attention, but it's kind of like that, because we are fitting through clusters, because by the way, these little quantiles form like, I have another graph where actually I draw the quantiles. You can see the dots and the points that are the quantiles, the points that were selected to do this fitting. By the time you go to these upper values, it's really like 5% of the data. So we are little clusters of points close to these tops. And so, of course, I can fit stuff there, because, if I tilt it a little bit, I can still go through this data point and they can catch the next thing. So it's nonsense. Okay. It's they say whole models are wrong, but some are useful. I think it's actually a wrong statement. It was done by somebody, right? It was made by somebody. I will say, if a model is not useful, then it's not good, or it's wrong. It's the other way around. Like, the emphasis should be you are wrong or right according to how useful the model is. If a model, it could be even completely wrong. It could give us some kind of very simple description of what is going on, but it has some utility because it does represent something that is really happening in the system and is predictive and is reliable and it works all the time, then it's basically true, because a lot of things around us, our eyes, our ears, it's interpretation. We are interpretation of reality, right? There is processing, there is signal processing, and it's not really what is happening over there. It's some kind of representation. Everything is a model. Absolutely everything. Our brain is a model machine. We make model of everything. But there are useful things if I imagine, and there are some people that have some cognitive problem where I had an experience that, let me finish my thought. We have some cognitive problem where they distort completely the reality so much that is useless. For example, imagine somebody that had some inability to hear and he started to hear even a language that he knows exactly like if it was this. I think the guy was called Buffalo, something like that. He was making this weird, this translation based on how things sound instead of what they mean, right? It will be horrible. I had a problem one time. I was taking some medicine and I noticed something weird, that every single food tasted like metal. It was completely disgusting. Even the floor, there was a wood floor that you cannot smell normally. I was hypersensitive. I could, maybe like dogs, but it was distorted. I could feel the smell of the floor, and it was horrible because even that smell felt like metal or something, and I couldn't do anything. I had to be paralyzed in the bed because if I moved anything, it was really horrible. It lasted several hours and was one of the worst experience. Distortion of a signal, right? Enormous distortion of a signal. This is a distortion of a signal. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that it's a good method to find the bottom, okay? So it gives us a very good method because I can show you the real, how it looks with the real data. So here it's, so I did, let me show you this. And this is another problem that we can discuss in a second. But it gives us a fantastic bottom. Like you can find that power law with only 4 years of data. You imagine this, that you were 4 years after the creation of Bitcoin, that basically 2013, and you could have predicted what the $16,000 price, that reached in 2021, wherever it was, almost that 2022, sorry, almost perfectly. It predicted that bottom and all the other bottom that we had. So that long trajectory, it's solid like rock. It's almost scary how incredibly precise it is. Okay, if I only select actually these dots that are separated, because they are separated from the bubble by the bubble. The bubble leaves a path at the bottom, and 2 years later it comes back and it goes back exactly on that crazy straight line. So when people say the power law is not exact, they don't know what they are talking about. That part, the bottom, if you consider that a real power law, the real signal, it's incredibly precise, almost scary. That is incredible, and the quantile method is probably one of the most robust methods to find that, because it selects the relevant data points, and then you can do this game of adding a little bit more of data point, more data point, more data point, and see, even when I add more and more data point, it's still a power law. If the majority of the data does follow power law. Now we start to see crazy behavior when we add the upper values. By the time we add the upper values, we see these anomalies. One of these is shown here. So what I'm showing, I don't know if you can see it very well. So there is a video by APSK around, I already mentioned, where it does this like in a little movie, but it's so fast that you don't catch it. You don't see what is really going on. And this is what is going on. If I use data up to that, the black here is, I'm pretending I know this data, I don't know the red one, right? That is the future. So you play this game where you don't know what comes next. And so this is why you see how I do continuous line. up to that point, and then I do dotted line. Dotted line is my prediction. What will be the prediction using only the black data. And you can see it misses the next top. So when they say, oh, it predicted the next top, it's not true, and I'm pretty sure I'm following my code, doesn't have a bug, it works like them. I'm asking them, can you reproduce it? Can you do this? Sina did a very good job in showing that the middle line, the 50 percentile, it's stable in the sense that, if you do this work, it will be consistent with what comes next, but it doesn't work for the upper quantile. That is the issue. That is what I'm addressing. You cannot tell me, oh, it's stable in the middle. I know that it's stable in the middle because it's describing the real true power law that we are saying is real and is stable. It's there. It's a real signal. But it's not a good tool to describe the upper tops. It's not. Because you see what happens next. So, for example, if you stick to the prediction that you will make by using only the data up to that black line, black dots, you get 99,000, okay, for the next top. And that, now you have to see what am I going to use? Am I going to use the first top? I'm going to use the second top. It doesn't matter. It's kind of the same. One is worse than the other. But I think I use the best case scenario here, where one is the real one is 59, the predicted one is 99. Okay, it's kind of okay if you stick with order of magnitude. The problem is what I showed you before. We know from my theoretical example that if this decay continues, the next top will be even worse. The next top will be even worse. So it has no predictive power. It's going to become worse and worse. Notice in my example, after the 4 oscillation, it becomes really bad. And you say, but it's a theoretical example. Yeah, exactly. It's a theoretical example that is not dissimilar from the real one, where the signal decays. And say, well, what if it doesn't decay? I don't know. It's going to be even worse because the decay, when they say, oh, it's agnostic to this, it's not true, because the data that you use to train the model has a decay, has cycle. If these peaks were all over the place, if a peak, I can show you. This is why you make theoretical model, because you cannot really change the real data, but you can show what will happen. We can make a model where we don't have periodic signals, and I can show you that it will be even worse, that the fitting will be even worse. You are including the information of the real data that has oscillation. You are including in the real data the decay. So you cannot say it's agnostic to this, when actually the data you're using has this information backed in. The information shows up in the data. And so when you're training it, it tries to do its best to respond to that information, like it tries to do its best in my fake model, in my toy model. And it doesn't do a good job. No, it doesn't do a good job for the top. It does very good job for the middle and the smaller quantiles. Otherwise, it fails. And you see what happens next when I include more data, and now I include the next bubble. It tries to go there. It tries to go there because now this new top is part of the higher quantiles. And so, in fact, actually, what happened? I don't show it here. The first bubble gets excluded. It's not included. If you tell the code, show me the 95% quantile, it doesn't include, it includes the first bubble, but then after all these data points, it does include the first bubble. So what is considered upper quantile changes as we get more and more data. And now it includes the next one. So it tries to fit there. It tries to make that straight line. It looks curved here, but it's a straight line. Remember, it's a power law. It tries to fit a power law through these points when there is not a power law there. So, okay, is it kind of okay? It's kind of describing more or less where the price is going. Kind of. We have other tools. They all this started because they hate this idea that I can draw a sine wave. You literally can draw sine waves, and it will do a better job because it will tell you where the peak is, when it's going to happen. Now you can debate, well, but maybe next one is now periodic. Fine, but then neither of these methods will work because this information is based on periodic signal. You cannot avoid that. You cannot say, because see, I told him from the beginning, I told him PlanC, I don't like these lines. I like the line in the bottom because even with your eyes, you can see there are a bunch of points that are aligned. Why? We don't know, or maybe we know. It has to do with the cost of production. It needs to be completely verified, but empirically, it's there. It's undeniable. It's striking. There is no such a line there on the top. I told PlanC so many times, but he doesn't listen, because he needs to go. And it's great, you explore, etc. But then, you cannot fool people telling, oh, I found this thing, and it doesn't correspond to anything. It has problems. I told him from the time, let's not tell people lies about there is such a ceiling when we cannot find such a ceiling. At most, what we can do, that is what I do all the time, is say, look, it looks periodic, there is a decay. If this decay continue to be the same, if a periodicity continue to be the same, this is what I'm expecting roughly in this region. Actually, this is much more agnostic in the sense that, I'm very honest and open, and I'm still telling you maybe it doesn't happen, because the assumption is that everything repeats exactly like before, while you're saying, yeah, it could be anywhere, maybe it can arrive there. No, it cannot arrive there. It cannot arrive there, because if there is a decay and that decay is real, it has absolutely zero chance. See, let me explain you another concept, okay? Many times people make the criticism about these ideas of using, they say, you cannot use the past to predict the future. I agree. Most of the time, with very complex, random things, you cannot. But this is not random. The power law is scale invariant. So and the bubbles are periodic. So there are two situations in physics when we feel very confident about making predictions. One is when you have something like this that is scale invariant for several reasons. Why? Because in general, this system continues to be scale invariant. That is exactly what it means. As the system grows, it will continue to grow in this proportional fashion. It's a property of a system. You found the property of a system and say, I think this property will continue to exist. A characteristic is, it's something typical of this system to behave in this way. Now, is it absolutely certain? No, I never say that. I'm just saying this system tends to be like this. It's something that is better than nothing. It's something much more better than nothing. Okay? It's actually pretty strong. People have tested this thing. Otherwise, we will not have called it a special name. If you give a special name to a phenomena, it means that there is something true there. There is something consistent. Okay? And we are fortunate that Bitcoin is such a scale invariant system because we can make a very strong case that it will continue. Remember, I came up with the power law 6 years ago, and we are following the power law from when I discovered it. If you follow from the beginning, but you could say, well, it's inside. No, it's foresight, because I have been a prophet for almost 6 years, okay, using the same parameter. I have posted graphs where you can show calculations that were done 6 years ago by me and others, and tell where the general direction of the price, in fact, you could do it with the bottom, is going to be. And that's been true. Scale invariance. The other thing is the periodicity. You could have guess where the third top was by using the periodicity, because they usually happen at the same time. They happen quarter 4 of a year of a bull run. 4 years, we have 2 years close to the bottom, 1 year bull, 1 year down. But here, the top usually are quarter 4. Because we had two tops, so you can argue which one was which. Well, it turns out the second one was where all the other one were. You can show it by taking segments of the data, superimposing, and showing where the peaks are. I have done this many times. So that is another thing. You could have predicted just using the first two bubbles, but the third one happened exactly where it happened. You could have done that. Now, does it have to apply for the next bubble? No. Periodicity is a little bit, if there is a hierarchies of things that are predictable, scale invariance is the most predictable things that you can ever imagine. When there is periodicity, because usually things that are periodic, there are reasons why they are periodic. Usually we want many periodic periods, right? If you live 3 days and you see the sun come up 3 days, like you're conscious for 3 days, say, whoa, the sun's come up every day. 3 days. It could be a coincidence, right? After thousands of years, right? Because you don't rely just on your own experience, but also other humans, right? You read in books, etc. Yeah, it's 1 day or whatever. Then you start to trust it more and more and more, right? We have only 3 bubbles. Now you can include the fourth one. Unfortunately, the fourth one is 2 years away from the second one. So many times I exclude it from the analysis. So you stick with the first 3, with the 2, 3, and 4. And there are reasons to justify that. They are consistent. They are associated with the halving. So there is some reason. It's not good, right? It will have been good even the first one was separated by 4 years. It's not, right? That is one of the limitations. So you understand the limitation. See, this is much better game where you know what are the assumptions are. You know what is true. You don't know what is not true, and you play with that. And if you declare it, if you put it in the table and you explain it to people, it's perfectly fine. You say, under this condition, if everything repeats the same, if we have the same periodicity as before, if a decline is the same, because that is another thing. You could have used the decline to actually predict very precisely the fourth bubble, because the decline is real, it's there, and it can predict the fourth bubble very precisely. This is how you do this analysis, right? It's much more complex. And so is this completely useless and something to throw away, never see it again? No, but don't advertise it as this universal method, did a fantastic job. It didn't. It did a good job, a great job for the lower quantiles. It finds that power law, but it is not the ultimate method. Maybe there are other methods. My feeling is that the dynamics here is complex, and these bubbles are so complicated in terms of how to explain only by stats. So basically the goal here, can we use just stats to explain how these bubbles appear and how the data is distributed? Not really. You will have to do a little bit more of work. Like, for example, go and listen to our episode of Physics of Bitcoin with Stephen, because Stephen did an amazing job. He showed that really the distribution of the data, if you take all the deviations, it's bimodal. Sina dismisses, saying, it could be noise. No, it's not noise. It's a real signal. You can look at with your eyes. You can show it that there are 2 regimes, actually 3. There is bottom, top, and middle. You can use sophisticated method like he used hidden Markov chain, that is a method to look at transition when one thing goes to another. There are this very sophisticated method that many finance people don't ever use. They are not familiar with them, but we do in physics. And so you can look at these states and show there are 3 states. You don't want to use your eyes, use something more sophisticated. There are 3 states. And then you can use that and look at the stats of these, or you can exclude one of the states and say, I'm going to look at only at the lower state and how that behaves. I'm going to look only at the upper state. And so, for example, I created this bimodal power law where I try to separate the 2 components, and it's doing a perfect job in determining where the bubbles are, how big these deviations are in terms of standard deviation. It's more complex. There is no simple solution. I know people like a nice little simple band where it feels good, etc. But it's like, yeah, it feels good to go to McDonald's when you eat this food that is designed to give you a sense of pleasure, but it's trash food. This is the equivalent of trash food. It has problems. So, and okay, you can still do it. It looks kind of nice, gives you kind of a feeling, but don't advertise it as something that is not. Don't, because when I'm sorry, Giovanni will appear out of nothing, like the Spanish Inquisition. So I'm the equivalent of a Spanish Inquisition. I'm going to embrace that role. It kind of pisses me off when they say I'm trying to police this and this other. Okay, I'm going to police it. I'm going to be the police. Okay, because it seems in this space, if you do crazy things, when people accuse you of crazy things, the best thing is to embrace it, instead of resisting it. You like shit coins, embrace shit coins. Become a shit coiner, and people will love it. Will love it. Will become a hero. Or maybe some people will think you are a villain, other people will think you are a hero. So I'm going to embrace being the police. I'm going to police, because if you say bullshit, I'm going to call you bullshit. If you say this is the ultimate method, it's amazing, it does a great job, it doesn't. It has a lot of problems, and we are in the beginning. We are seeing just the beginning of a problem, because according to my theoretical model, that the quantile, you can say it's a theoretical model. I don't care. It is something that decays over time. It was not able to handle that signal. So I cannot expect that it will be able to handle this signal that is even more complex. I cannot. It's an approximation. So I kind of worked for the first few bubbles, kind of. You can see even here I missed it by more than 2, almost 2, but it didn't do. It will be worse and worse and worse as we go up in time, because there will be a more and more. These quantiles will mean less and less with time, because it's simply the wrong tool. Look at it again. If you can dismiss it, my example, as much as you want, but again, imagine this was a real signal Bitcoin. You feed it to the quantile, it fails. It's useless, right? Why will I care about this blue line there? They mean nothing. Okay, yeah, some boundary, but at a certain point, you see, these are logs, by the way. The distance looks small, but it's enormous. It's not really representing the signal correctly. So it's not really too meaningful or too useful, And for sure, it's not this, oh, wow, this incredible tool, blah, blah, blah. It's not. All right, I think I did my job. I explained you what is the problem with this thing. It's power laws in the end. There are deviations from the power law. It's not a new method. It's just one of the many regressions. In other episodes, maybe I should do a series all on different regressions. So these regressions shows this. We can use Bayesian. We can use these. They are all going to show you a power law. The power law is going to be there all the time. And then there is some interpretation by this method of what these bubbles are. And so the question is, how should we represent this bubble? In my opinion, until there is evidence that the cyclic nature of the bubbles is violated, we are not seeing any more cycles. They are not happening where they are supposed to be. The decay is not real. It's just some kind of coincidence. Then we will need to go back to the drawing board. But right now, the evidence is that, and we should use that evidence. You will be actually throwing away the signal. That is the other thing that you don't do. When there is a signal, you take it. If there is it's actually, Sina is wrong with this. He thinks like a finance people. I'm thinking like a physicist. If I see 3 oscillations and they are periodic, I take that signal seriously. That is taking Bitcoin seriously. You're saying, I'm taking Bitcoin seriously. I think these oscillations are happening for a reason. And until the data proves me wrong, I'm going to assume that it repeats. I'm going to be careful. I'm not going to put all my life on that bet, but that is the scientific thing to do. It's not a scientific thing to do is say, I'm an agnostic. Well, you're throwing information, but is exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get information out of the noise. So you're throwing the information when we are so lucky that these oscillations are so periodic. It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's like some kind of purism based on, oh, but it could be that they are everywhere. Well, then you will have to go to the drawing board anyway. You will have to refit everything. You will have to use a completely different distribution. The distribution will change completely if these bubbles are not periodic anymore. If a cycle length lasts like I can demonstrate you. I can do this. I will show you. I will show you what happened with this signal if I make I can do it. It's very easy. I can make the bubbles go farther and farther apart to make the cycles longer and longer. Let's see how the quantile works. It will be even worse. It will be even worse because whatever information you have, it will be even more confused. Now there is one more thing that this method needs to account for with a bunch of straight line. It needs to account for a decay. It needs to account for longer thing. It will get confused. It cannot translate this thing with the tool you're giving. It's not designed for that. It's designed to deal with these fuzzy power laws, that Sina gave us an example of, general example. No, the general example is not where the problem is. The problem is with this complex signal. Basically, how do I need to explain it, right? It's stats cannot reproduce the dynamics. It's ridiculous, right? This is why in physics we have equations and we use stat. We use stat as a last resort. When we use stats, when we don't know what is going on, and then we say, oh, let's use stat, like with thermodynamics. You cannot, with thermodynamics, if we could follow every single little particle inside a hot object, that is how thermodynamics was developed. People were thought, well, we could apply Newton physics to every single little particle. Well, okay, but then you have to follow every single part. How do you do that? You cannot. So what do? You settle on some kind of average description of a motion of a particle. It's a cop-out. We use stats, but in situations like that, when you don't know much about what is going on, if you have some signal, you stick with the signal. And by the way, I think I didn't finish that line of thought. Remember when I told you scaling variance is predictive, oscillations are predictive. Is decay predictive? Up to a point, because I told you exponentials are not scale invariant, so exponential are not to be trusted. But you know what? Decays are, because there are many phenomena in physics, like, for example, nuclear decays, right? We see these things all the time. There is the radioactivity of our nuclear material decays like an exponential. There are many things that in life decay as exponential, and there is, again, a reason for that. So in general, if something decays in a very regular fashion, it's somehow predictable. So I will put it at the lowest level of a hierarchy. First, scale invariance, oscillations, and then decays, exponential decays. All things that are somehow predictable. If you use stats, that saying, that people have all the time, that you cannot use the past to predict the future, I mean, in disorganized things like that, applies. So then why should I even trust these things at all? You don't use any scaling principle. You're not using any periodicity, simply because it happened in the past. Because you see, you need to look for something. And I'm trying to make a lecture about what we are looking for this model. Do you know what is the first thing that you should look in a model all the time? Self-consistency. This thing is not even self-consistent, because we are saying, oh, we are agnostic to things. Well, that means you're basically guessing. You don't say there are periodicity, you don't say there is decay, there is just some pattern, and you're, statistical pattern, and we should trust this statistical pattern as a guide for the future. Why? And this, one of the statistical patterns that you can trust, Gaussian distribution, because if you see a Gaussian distribution, probably the system is such a state that is kind of in equilibrium. Usually you see this Gaussian in equilibrium situations, etc., when basically it's kind of like heat, right? Everything mixed together, and then it's so orderly that distributions, you have a certain probability to go to the right, a certain probability to go to the left. It's a very boring system. Yes, in a situation like that, maybe you could trust the Gaussian, but this is a highly dynamical system, and you are trying to use stats. Completely unreliable. These were 30 years of data analysis comes, because these things to me are normal. I'm thinking about this thing. This might, how people think about random stuff, right? I think about this stuff all the time. To me, this thing is natural. And if I had Steven with me, he will tell you, yeah, we will agree. If I had a third physicist, he will agree. I don't know why other people in other fields don't think like that. But, this is why physicists have invented everything. We are discovering the world, and then, other people in other field not so much. There is this sentence called physics envy. Almost everything field wants to be like physics, and many times they cannot, because they can if they thought correctly about physics. They don't know how to think about correctly. So yeah. So hopefully you understand what I mean. Hopefully this is interesting and useful, and it's mostly about how to think about models, what they give us, what they don't give us, what they're good for, etc., right? And maybe one day we show you how these things look like doing many different type of regressions. This regression helps with this regression helps with that, and so on and so on. All right, let me see if there is any questions at all. So I have this question. Let me show this question. Does it even show? Yes. No, I don't see the question. I see the question, but it doesn't show it. Okay, yes, now it does. JJ Tolson. Okay, thank you, JJ Tolson, for the question. What are some of the power laws in the real world with more correlation than Bitcoin? Is there something that's yeah, like planets? If you look at planets in the sky, and you look at the distance of a planet versus the distance of how long it takes the planet to go around the sun, so basically what is called the orbital period. So you do this thing is called the Kepler's law. The power laws are so important. Then when you discover one, they are usually named after you. All right. So hint. No, I'm kidding here, right? This could be called the Santo-Stasi law. I mean, really, I'm serious in the sense that they are really important. And Bitcoin is such a serious. I rather call it the Bitcoin power law. The Santo-Stasi law. I don't deserve that honor. Or let's call it the Satoshi law. Why not him? It's that kind of power law is amazing. Like, everybody should do it. If you really want to do a gift to yourself to understand the universe, get the data online. There are many places where you can do it. And maybe I want to make one day, I want to make a nice place where you have like lectures and people can follow, and there'll be a lecture of how to make your own power law. And you can take data I can show you a site where you can download the data. And then nowadays you can ask ChatGPT, can you make a log plot of this data? Maybe even ChatGPT finds it for you. I don't know. See if that works. And when you plot it, you plot the log of a distance of a planet. We usually call it the semi-major axis, but it's basically the distance of a planet. And the time that it takes for the planet to go around the sun, the period, the orbital period. And it's a beautiful straight line. It's almost shocking. It's like, whoa, imagine what happened when Kepler found it. He didn't have, historically, they didn't have ways of drawing these things because it came later. You see these graphs, they seem so natural to us. Kepler didn't have it. This was like in the Renaissance, right? It's 1600, something like that. Descartes invented these graphs, how to plot y versus x. This is why we call them Cartesian axis, right? So they didn't have a way of drawing it, but he could do the calculations. They just invented the logs at that time. He was actually one of the people that contributed to understand the logs. So for some reason, it was the fashionable thing to do. He took the log of one quantity, took the log of the other. It's a little bit more complex than that. I'm simplifying, but he realized there was this very nice progression, that one quantity was proportional to the other. And he spent his life to look for this thing, he spent his life. He had this intuition. There was some regular pattern in nature, in these planets, and he was trying all kind of crazy things, kind of almost exoteric things, like different platonic solid, all kind of absurd things, and finally found this beautiful pattern that is a power law. So in a certain sense, real science started with the power law. And then Newton came about, and he explained where the power law was coming from. It was coming from the law of gravity, that you could explain if it was an attraction between the planets that went down with the square of distance, then you will have, and there was a proportional force to the masses of a planet, then the consequence will be this power law. He was the 100 years later, he explained this. It's a beautiful story. Somebody, I don't know if anybody wrote it, but somebody should write that story. Maybe when I'm writing a book on Bitcoin and the power law, and include stories like this, how some power laws that people discovered, and how amazing is the discovery, right? So, but in terms of correlation, me and Stephen, in fact, yesterday when we had our show, we were talking about this bottom power law. It's nuts. It's so crazily straight, in particular also because there are gaps, right? It leaves because there are these deviations. So I think the power law is always there. It's just that there is an additional thing, and so it looks like a gap, but the power law is always there. There is some basic signal, basic way that somehow we value Bitcoin over time, but is always there. But it looks like gaps because on top of that, we have also these times where the price is a little bit more volatile. So we kind of it looks like we are leaving the power law, and then we are coming back 2 years later. And we go back to the same place. That is completely absurd. Something that needs to be understood, and people ignore it because they don't understand and they don't want to accept it. I don't know. It's such a weird phenomenon because once I announce it, every single Bitcoin analyst should embrace it and understand it. They refuse. I don't know. It's a weird, it's kind of similar to what Galileo did. It took time for people to accept that the sun was the center of the universe and not the other way around. So I think it's something like that. Over time, people will accept it, but it's incredible. It's just anybody that knows this stuff professionally look at it, think, and say, this is scary. This is strange. What is going on here? It's weird. So yeah, Bitcoin is really amazing. Okay. Hey Giovanni, what will be a 90 percentile for March 1st? I don't know. We can calculate it. I can show it. I mean, I can post myself, my quantile model. I don't know what tell us. It doesn't tell us anything. This is what I'm trying to tell us. It doesn't tell us, the best thing you can do, what we can do, I have a trading view indicator that tells that we can project what the power law tell us the price is going to be for the next month, or 2 months from now, 3 months from now, right? In fact, maybe I should do like a regular bulletins, right? Maybe my newsletter, maybe my site, my X, like little tables of what the power law says. And then we can say, well, what if we did 2 times, right? Because in a bubble, for example, usually we go a little bit faster, right? And right now we are in a bubble. And if we go to that 200K that I'm predicting for the end of the year, we are supposed to go 2 times faster than the power law. So right now we do about 0.1% a day. If we reach that 200K, we need to do 0.2%. You see, these are the things that are more scientific than drawing some lines and boundaries. That bottom line, it's a special line. We want to take it seriously and not fool around and draw a bunch of arbitrary lines, that don't mean anything. This is why I'm so pissed off, because these lines are just like, it's almost like saying, oh, there is not just one power law, there are many power laws. What are you talking about? It's a nonsense answer, because we know it's nonsense by my model, by my little example. This is what the quantile says, but it's a nonsense. So I don't know. I don't know if it is useful to tell us. We can calculate, but I don't know. I don't remember. I don't have it memorized. It's something crazy, because 90% right now, I think we are close to 70 quantile. 90% will be something really far. And right now we are not supposed to be there anyway, So why will it be? Why will it be? See, when PlanC say I'm agnostic, what do you mean? Do you mean that when we are at the bottom, there is a non-zero chance to go to the top? Because if it is the 95% quantile, it means there is some chance, and that line is always there. You're lying, because if or you're lying, or you don't know what you're talking about, because if you take it literally, it means there is a non-zero chance that we go there. And so all of a sudden, by tomorrow, we can go from, remember when we were 16,000, we are 16,000. Oh, we could go, whatever it was. Let's say it was 100,000. Oh, 100,000. We could go there and be 100,000 when we were 16 in a day. If you take it really like kind of a meme, right? Then you can take it seriously. Well, no, really, we will have to go there slowly. How slowly? How long? So then it's not time agnostic, because you will have to tell me what is reasonable time to go there. How long it will take me to go there if I am at the bottom? What are you talking about? How we do this, Jess? What are you talking about? It's a useless quantity. It doesn't mean anything. So when they say, well, it's more dangerous to identify a point, I'm at least coherent and consistent. I'm telling you, I think these periodicity are serious. And so I want consistency in my description of Bitcoin, because I take it seriously. And I don't say nonsense things like the price can be anything. You see, that is one of the criticisms that people like British Hodl say, well, I always say that. I always see, it's funny that Sina gave us this example. If a Bitcoin was like this, it depends how big they are. If they are fuzzy but very narrow around the power law, it will be fantastic, because it means there is just a little bit deviation. Right? But imagine this deviation were huge. They say that means if you take this seriously, any day you could be at the bottom, the day after you could be all the way over there. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous interpretation. It's a ridiculous interpretation. That is. In fact, I'm going to call this the British Hodl understanding of the power law. He thinks the power law is something like that. It's not. You see how ridiculous it is? This is why I care about these things, because I have an intuition about these things much deeper than, I'm sorry if it sounds arrogant. It's true. Challenge me. Come and tell me, no, I understand it better than you. This is why. Tell me, you don't get these things. You draw something like that, and then you don't realize that is British Hodl model of a power law. He thinks like that, and he's right. British Hodl is right if that was the power law. That model means I could be at the bottom, and there is a non-zero chance that I can go higher. In fact, actually, you know what? If this is just Gaussian noise, there is, a pretty good chance that I go there. It could happen at any moment. It's just that statistically, there are no other points, but there is nothing. In fact, we have swings in price. We could go lose 1% one day, and then 2 days later we do 2%. This is how random things work. These large deviations in total are rare, but it doesn't help us. Literally, you could go over there to this crazy huge price, because these are logs at any moment, and that is not what Bitcoin does. And this is why the quantile model is crap. It's really literally crap. It's crap. It's kind of worse than S2F. You know why I say that it's not? But because it lies. It doesn't explain people. See, at least that model is so stupid. But once you get it, you realize how stupid it is. This one, it kind of makes you feel good because they have these very smooth little lines, but they are meaningless. They don't mean anything. For sure, it doesn't mean that you can jump to that lines at any moment, right? They don't mean that. It's ridiculous interpretation. And the other interpretation, I want to know from Sina and PlanC a reasonable, intelligent explanation of what is their interpretation of this. Because right now I didn't hear. In fact, I heard it and it makes no sense. It doesn't mean 5% this, 5% that. It doesn't. Because if I am at the bottom, the chance to go to that quantile is 0, 0. It's almost like you're drawing it, but it doesn't mean anything. So why do you drawing it? You understand? Hopefully you understand. And a song for Leah. I think this comes from a science fiction story or something, right? By the same author that wrote Game of Thrones. It's really cool. The metabolic rate of animals as the body mass. Exactly. This is a beautiful power law. It's pretty straight. Maybe that is as close how straight the coin is. We could try to calculate this. R squared doesn't tell the entire picture. It's very narrow. It's so predictive. It's not just a matter of R squared. There is more tests that you can show how incredibly this. But something like that. Yeah, something that happens in nature. Some phenomena like these power laws. This is called the Kleber's law. But this one mentioning this question. Yeah, thank you for that. And he say, I'm here, quantile regression is a shit coin. Yeah, big cows. Yeah. I mean, like, again, let me be honest, right? It is a useful tool to find the bottom. The bottom is good because actually we can try, but I think it kind of gives the same result than the normal type. If you exclude the top, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you use quantile. It doesn't matter if you use least square. It doesn't matter Bayesian. They give all the same results. It actually is good that you have several regression methods that all give the same result. That is great. That is amazing, right? So it's a confirmation that there is a real signal there. So the quantile plays that role. It's just another method that shows that if you take several levels, maybe that is where it does, right? With other method or now, because it has this inherent way of including more and more data points. You could do the same. In fact, I did the same. You could say, I'm going to you can use the same concept of quantile, but don't use that weighted method that we use in the quantile approach. You can just do a least square. And you will get something. I have a graph for that. You will get exactly the same result, kind of basically the same, because what are you looking for? How parallel these lines are. You will get a bunch of parallel lines. And that, in physics, we call it a physical signal, because, mathematics many times gives you solutions, and these solutions are meaningless, and we call them non-physical, right? If I do some calculations and I get everything, correct when the temp, it gives me positive and negative temperature. And then it explains very well this phenomena and how it changes temperature. But also it gives me like, there are negative temperatures. There are solutions like that. Am I going to take this negative temperature seriously? Say, oh, maybe, you know what? Sometimes people did it and they found new things. They found like antiparticles. One time there was a solution like that seemed to give weird answer. There was some negative charge, negative matter or whatever, and people took it seriously and they discover new particles. Sometimes it happens, but very, very rare, very rare. Many times we find situation where it's simply, mathematics doesn't know about reality. Like you cannot have negative matter. We never observe. Maybe you have, but we cannot have. Or you cannot have, whatever. You don't have a repelling gravity, right? So if you find a solution, we say, this happen, you can test it. You will say, oh, maybe this is anti-gravity, but most of the time it doesn't happen. So we throw away these solutions. We simply throw them away. So these upper quantile, you should throw them away. They are useless. Or if you want to keep them, tell people not to take them seriously. That is some kind of weird, very far off possible limit based on previous behavior that almost unlikely, basically unlikely that is going to happen, because we observe this decay, and that decay is real because is associated with the power law. It's diminishing returns of everything, of not just the tops, but the entire volatility of Bitcoin is becoming smaller. So this is why you get these smaller tops. So it's a real thing, and you cannot say, oh, but it could go anywhere there. No, it cannot. I'm sorry, it cannot. Will you teach us Fourier transform on the? We should have maybe like regular. We kind of tried in my Discord. Maybe we should do it publicly because we will have more people coming in. Maybe I can try to find a day in my schedule where we just do a little bit of deeper things like this, right? We go, we can look at the code, and maybe just few people will follow, but we can look at the code of how to do a Fourier transform. We can, and every time when we learn a new thing, then we can apply to Bitcoin. You see, for example, we can apply Fourier transform, and you will see there is that nice peak. There is a beautiful peak that corresponds to the periodic oscillations. They are real. The signal is there. You cannot ignore it. You can pretend to ignore it, but it's not the scientific thing to do. It's not the right thing to do. You don't want to throw away signals when you have it. Anyway, so I think this was. No, these were the questions. Okay, guys. Unless you have a last minute question or anything, maybe we can conclude here. Hopefully, this was useful and interesting. All right. Thank you so much.